6 years ago, Bayer basically made one of the worst purchases in American business. They bought Monsanto.
Nice.
To the tune of $63 billion.
Wow.
$63 billion. Yeah, it was a big company. It was making lots of money, doing this pesticide thing, bought it. And at the time that they bought it, there was already a suit that was pending. And this was up in the San Francisco area by a groundskeeper.
Only one.
There was so there was the one case, and this was in 2 months. 2 months after the merger goes through, the jury hits them with $289 million.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're probably like buyer's remorse, right?
Yeah.
And as we all know, it didn't stop there.
Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome back. Another day, another episode. How are you doing? How are you feeling? How's your weekend?
My weekend was fabulous. Absolutely fabulous.
Absolutely fabulous. I feel like that's kind of like the consistent trend usually.
I don't know if I've been that, glowing about all the weekends, but this was a really fun one. We went up to Mount Lemmon for the weekend.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I have convinced Peter that he wants to take at least a day off once a month to
I see. You should frame it more. You reminded him that he wants to, not convinced him, because he always wanted to. You just had to put that thought back in his head. Sometimes us guys, we got a lot going on. Sometimes these thoughts just fall out of our ears. We don't know where they went.
Well, he loves short little trips. I think he actually loves these like long weekend trips more than he likes big long trips.
Yeah, I think most people do, honestly.
I don't know. We were having dinner with some friends last night, and they were talking about going just said I think 3 months. I mean,
Jesus,
they travel. Well, they leave for the whole summer, but they stay one place for 2 months, another place for a couple of weeks.
Like that.
Well, no, actually, I think they're traveling first class and really nice hotels. Yeah. But anyway, so yes, I realized how much Peter really wanted to take a weekend a month and travel with me and the dogs, and encouraged him to do that. So we have been doing that consistently for the last few months. And this past weekend, we went to Mount Lemmon.
Nice and local compared to your usual ones.
Yeah, super local. In fact, it was less than an hour door to door from our, literally walking out the door to the cabin that we stayed at. But the crazy thing is we went from 2,500 elevation here to 8,500.
Yeah, I mean, you're driving up close to 90 degrees when you're going up that
mountain.
Yeah.
It winds. And Peter was very comfortable. He was not nervous at all, even though there was quite a bit of snow at the top. And in fact, it was snowing Thursday night and Friday morning. And so we were a little bit worried because the road was closed early Friday morning. And we thought that the trip might be off. But they did clear it, and we got up there, and it was beautiful and no additional snow. So we had no issue coming home. Although I was kind of hoping we might get snowed in. I thought that might be kind of fun.
That would be fun. I think driving down those diagonal hills would be concerning with some ice on them.
Yeah, I mean, there was snow, like I said, at the very top, but the rest of it, all good. So we got to do some hiking around. We did a little bit of hiking. We tried to do a hike in the snow, and realized pretty quickly that was probably not smart because it was very slippery. And again, when you're hiking in the mountains, you are doing a lot of going up hills, down hills. Didn't want to slip and break a hip, God knows. So we just drove another 15 minutes down a little lower to where there was just a little bit of snow left over. Still nice, cool temperatures. But a little less risky.
Nice. So you kind of got the best of both worlds.
We did.
That sounds like a fantastic trip. I don't believe fully that he wasn't nervous at all.
I asked him, and he was like, absolutely not.
Well, he's not going to admit it. He's got to keep up the facade. Especially, I mean, hopefully you didn't give him the preface, don't worry, I'm going to tell the entire podcast audience how terrified you are of driving up this.
I did tell him we were talking about him and that you mentioned he might be nervous about it. And I also told him that he gets a fair amount of airtime here. So maybe he'll listen more often.
Yeah.
Now that he knows we talk about
Christina just listens to at least the intro part. That's her favorite part. Which I mean, I understand it. I guess she doesn't have a lot of interest in law and kind of cases and whatnot, and she cares more about us. But I'm always kind of curious about that with listeners, if there are certain segments that they prefer. I've been trying to tell people too that this is not just a boring legal podcast. I mean, Yeah, I wouldn't do it if it was boring.
No,
I wouldn't be
neither of
on
us
it.
would.
It wouldn't be boring with me on it.
It couldn't be boring.
couldn't be
You
boring.
guarantee that it's not boring.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, and I was actually thinking the other day, because we call it, prioritizing profits, dangerous drug and product cases, but we do talk about all areas of law.
Yeah.
But so we talk about really interesting different cases out there in the news, and some things that are not necessarily drugs or products. And we talk about medical malpractice, car accidents, all kinds of things, and just kind of outrageous stories sometimes. But we also hope that it's somewhat educational, and we talk about legal principles and legal rules and how it applies in day-to-day life sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we really got it all. We got it all over here.
Everything. We are at 5 stars.
Well, that does sound like a fantastic weekend. Hopefully, Pete does tune in to our future podcasts. I'm very impressed that he had no fear, no stress, no anxiety going down that hill. I will be man enough to say I would have anxiety. I have had anxiety, and especially if it's snowing. Going up those 90-degree, and they are right angles going up that hill. If it was icy, no shot, cancel the trip. My weekend was pretty good as well. I went and saw NASCAR on Sunday, which was sick, super sick. I think NASCAR gets a really bad rap,
Yeah.
which I kind of understandably so. I think it's a very stereotypical, right? Oh, it's just left turns. They're just taking left turns. You're watching them drive in circles, and a very redneck hillbilly vibes.
A lot of beer,
a lot of Bud Light, that type of thing.
American beer, yeah.
American beer, yeah. So, and anyways, it definitely does fit into some of those stereotypes a little bit, but the energy is fantastic. When you're actually there, it is insanely loud. I had no idea how loud it was because my buddy Z was talking about getting earbuds. I was like, what are you earbuds? I went, come on, buddy. That's embarrassing. People are going to be pointing and laughing at us. Little did I know, everyone has earbuds. Most people, like families, they'll bring headsets like this, and then they connect them, and there's mics on them.
So they can talk. Well, like we're doing. You could have taken these headsets.
Literally. We would have had to set up the whole podcast show and everything up there on the stands. But no, it's insane. It's insanely loud, but it's electric. It's good vibes. And then there was a lot of stops too, because usually they just keep going. But if there's a crash or something gets on the road, then they obviously have to stop. And when they start again, they keep everyone in their places, but they all start revving up at the exact same time. And it's pretty fucking insane. Seeing cars go that fast, that close to each other in unison, there's just something about it. It's like when you watch perfect basketball get played or perfect soccer, just an insane soccer play. You don't have to love soccer, but when you see a half field Ibrahimovic kick go into the back of the net, top right corner, you're like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You just have appreciation for it. And I think there are aspects of every sport, of every field that you don't have to really know what's going on, but you can still appreciate small parts of it.
So hopefully you're not going to be getting into NASCAR or as far as racing, because that sounds like I would be very nervous. I can drive up and down a mountain with snow, but NASCAR, there's crashes, the cars explode, there's fires. It's
There's
mayhem.
really not that many. Not as many as you would think. But it is dangerous. It's dangerous, 100%. Won't argue that. I did have an inkling to throw my Mercedes into sports mode on the way on the way to Tucson.
Rev it up a little bit.
Yeah. Lucky enough, I wasn't driving home, so I couldn't do that impromptu impulse decision like that there. But overall, it was a good time. Other than that, just kind of hanging out. Bitcoin's flying, 72K. No one's talking about it. Last time it was 69K. Everyone and their mom talking about it. Coinbase, #1 app on the App Store. Now 72K. Not a peep. It's crazy.
Everybody's just content now. Okay, well
I think it's
just taking off.
Everyone's I think everyone got burnt so bad on the last one that they're like, oh, well, enjoy it while it lasts. It's not going to last long. Last time it was here, look what happened. It went to zero.
So what do you think? This is your area. How confident are you? Are you making any big moves, any big plays?
Well, I think it's very much a long-term thing. I think Bitcoin's really, really long-term. I think most people see it, try to think about it in 2 to 3 year span. It's oh, well, I'm not going to be spending Bitcoin to buy products or anything. But also, you never thought you'd be using Apple Pay and pulling up your phone and putting it to a card reader to pay either. That's pretty insane. And you can do that with crypto. But that's also not the intent of Bitcoin, is to be used like that. It's meant to store value like gold. When you buy stuff, you're not handing gold over directly. directly. Even when you do like credit card and debit exchanges, like the banks aren't actually giving money to each other.
Right.
A lot of it's just kind of like numbers on a screen.
Exactly.
So anyways, I think Bitcoin is here to stay for sure. I think that there's going to be a ton of fluctuations. We saw like a 10K candle the other day where it just went down 10K and went back up 10K in the same day. Just insane. Like that's like 20% of its price, or at the time it was. But I think the ETF was really, really big because now people can safely and reasonably invest in it. If you don't have to have a Coinbase account, especially like the big institutions. I mean, people buying like hundreds of thousands, millions, and tens of millions of dollars worth of these assets, like they don't want control over it. Like they don't want to be able to just fuck it up and like send it off to like Oblivion, Nebula, nothing, because it's very easy to do that. Like it's easy just to lose your shit.
That makes me nervous.
Yeah. So the ETF kind of allows it, so it's non-custodial. You don't actually hold the funds, but these other funds, or these other like BlackRock and Blackscale, these other type of investment firms do hold it for you. And it allows for like retirement funds or 401ks. You can allocate, because usually it's big baskets, right? Baskets of stocks or baskets of funds. You can allocate percentages of your portfolio now to crypto, to Bitcoin.
Oh.
So that's insane. I mean, think about it. Like if every American with a 401k allocated even 0.1%, 0.01% of their retirement fund, of their 401k to Bitcoin, that's a lot of fucking money. That's a lot of fucking money. And in the last 10 years, it's performed, I think more than 10 years, it's performed better than the stock market every single year. So you look at that paper, it makes sense for long-term investors to want to invest in it. And it's pretty institutionalized now. So I think long-term it's good. Right now, who the fuck knows? You know, can't go anywhere.
Well, I see. Now we will need to let Peter know. Maybe we need to be shifting some of our investments.
Yeah, well, you guys got Sol back in the day. Probably it was not when it was super low, but it was on the way down. Now it's on the way back up, so that's good, I guess.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
You won't be retiring on that, though.
No. Hopefully I will be. We'll see. Updates on cases.
Okay. So first update is on the Elmiron MDL. And we haven't talked a lot about this, and it's basically shutting down is what we're talking about now. So it's not something you can get in on, but it's very interesting because it's a mass tort that went relatively quickly. And one of the big questions people always ask are how long these cases take. And some of them, like the hernia mesh, I mean,
Years.
It's dragging and dragging. Others go relatively quickly. And this was a mass tort involving a medication called Elmiron, and it was prescribed for interstitial cystitis.
Oh, yeah.
You've had that now.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and so basically that's bladder pain, pain with urination, a lot.
That is an insanely complicated word. What is that again? For bladder pain? Every time I wake up in the morning, I have...
interstitial cystitis.
That's a morning thing. That's a morning problem for me.
Well, I'm glad you're not on this medication. I mean, it generally happens to more women than men, and usually somewhat later in life. And there's not a lot of treatment for this kind of pain. It's like abdominal, urination, bladder pain. And so people were prescribed this medication, and it was just something that they took consistently for years and years and years. And there's a question as to how much it really helped. But, again, the drug companies are making money, they're selling it. It turns out that it caused damage to the eyes.
Okay.
Seems kind of weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as the longer that you took it, it built up in your system, and it became kind of it was basically a toxicity.
Yeah.
And so, but it was a very, very specific type of eye injury to the retinas, and it was called pigmentary maculopathy. So, and again, when you have like a signature injury like this, where it's something very specific, it's much easier than when
It's pretty clear cut. I mean, you can say, okay, I was using this product. There's a very, very specific disease connected directly to this product. Boom, bam, case shut.
And it's a rare disease
Yeah.
too. So it was relatively straightforward. A study came out in 2018 showing that it was linked. And then ultimately in 2020, they did change the label to include the warning and to recommend that women who were taking, or anybody who was taking the medication, have their eyes checked for this condition regularly. Because if you stop taking it, it doesn't go away, but it will stop getting worse. And so, they ultimately, it was kind of an admission that, yes, this is related because they did change the label in 2020.
But that doesn't technically count, isn't there? There's a clause where...
Right, you can't use that as evidence. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that this MDL went pretty quickly. It was formed in December of 2020, and it's basically shut down now. Most of the settlements happened last year in 2023, so that's pretty fast.
Yeah.
And so there were two. This MDL was both federal, and then there were also state cases. And the state cases just got resolved. There was supposed to be a trial starting this week, the first bellwether trial, and those cases settled. There was a bellwether that was supposed to be in the federal MDL back in 2023, and the cases settled short of that too. So it's one of those things. I always say, there may not be any bellwethers.
Yeah.
When you've got a pretty clear-cut situation where, it's a very specific injury and the causal link is very clear, oftentimes they were like, okay, let's just pay this. Let's not, piss around and have a bunch of trials and spend a bunch of money.
Well, it's good they're not wasting anyone's time, but I would imagine they would have to ante up quite a bit because in a clear-cut case like this, the plaintiff is going to want their day in trial. They want the bellwethers because, it is just straight out there, out in the open, and that's when you can really start adding on those punitives.
Well, unless they're paying a reasonable amount, because also the plaintiffs don't want the risk because they might lose.
Yeah, there's definitely downsides to both, but I guess in my mind, the only way it would make sense in a very clear-cut case is if the defense came to the table with a very good offer. They're not shorting anyone here, right?
Well, yes. So we actually, so these cases are also not very common. There was a total of 2,000 in the federal MDL and only 150 in the state court cases. So it was also very, again, it's a rare condition, and you needed to take this medication for a number of years for it to develop, generally speaking. We only had one case. But again, there's only,
That's
2,000. Well, no, and what I can say is, all the settlements are confidential, but I can tell you that they were very reasonable settlement. They were offering good money on these cases, which they should, because you're looking at potential blindness, and if not blindness, blurry vision. Real vision issues. Yeah. That's a big deal.
Well, once you start messing with the senses, that's a lot of, that's pretty fuckery, right? Like the jury's not going to be very kind to you if you're messing with people's ears, eyes, nose.
Well, and eyes probably even more. I think that would be the number one thing I would not want to lose.
Well, I think everyone, right? There's always that age-long question: would you rather be deaf or blind? But it's obvious. Obviously, you'd rather be deaf. Like you can.
I totally agree with you, but maybe there are people who
musicians, maybe.
Yeah, maybe musicians. I don't know.
You can't read music then.
Well, but some musicians don't ever need to read music. They're just naturals.
I think they need to read.
No, there's a lot of musicians who never read music.
Ever. You have to at some point. There has to be new music made that you're like, oh, I haven't heard that.
Well, you can watch it on YouTube.
Or you listen to it and they immediately know how to play it.
There are people who have an ear for that kind of thing. I'm telling you.
Okay, well, they can go with the blindness over deaf option. Everyone else.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Anyway, so that's all winding down. The cases that weren't settled are getting resolved. And again, sometimes this does happen. Which is why I wanted to point it out. Obviously, it's pretty much done. But interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, it's good to see that not every case has to take years and years. This hernia mesh thing has been...
It is really
dragged on, like insane.
Well,
amount.
and the talc, think about Johnson & Johnson. That's insane.
Well, and it's just not fair to the clients and the victims, and I'm sure it's incredibly frustrating for them and throw their hands up, and they have very little experience with this, and so they think like, oh, this is just how it always is. It's always just fucked like this. Like, what are we supposed to do? But there are cases that turn out a little bit better.
Yeah. So good news. And another update, and this is with regard to child sexual abuse cases. We've talked a lot about the Boy Scouts cases that we've handled, but there are also cases, against the various dioceses, churches, other organizations, troubled teen industry, schools, all of those types of things. And one of the issues that we have talked about previously is the issue of the statute of limitations and when the cutoff is for somebody, when somebody can no longer bring a lawsuit. And in a regular injury type of case, it depends on the state. Arizona would be 2 years from the date of injury. If you're a minor, that time frame starts to run basically on your 18th birthday. So you would have 2 years from when you're 18 if you're in Arizona, and then depending on other states, whatever their time frame is. But these are very specialized cases, and they're also, a lot of times people have a really hard time addressing these issues, and it's not something that at 18 or 20 they even want to think about or deal with. So people oftentimes don't get into therapy or treatment until their 20s or 30s. So a lot of states had opened windows where you could then bring lawsuits. They lasted sometimes a year, sometimes 2 years or 3 years. And then different states have different statute of limitations specifically for sex abuse child sex abuse that might happen now. For example, some states will say up until the age of 30. Up until the age of 50. So, but what a lot of advocates are really pushing for now is getting rid of statute of limitations altogether for this type.
I was going to ask, what's the point for this specifically? Because I know there's very good reason for statute of limitations to exist, but for this very specifically, sexual assault cases, I can't think of what the other side of the argument would be for. Well,
so the other side of the argument is that if it's too old, how can we defend ourselves? The witnesses are dead. Documents are not preserved. We can't disprove these claims.
Yeah.
And that may be the case. And it may be that the plaintiffs can't prove it. But to just say you don't even get to have a shot at it.
Yeah, I was going to say that still happens now, no?
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's still commonplace. And like you said, as long as you have a shot, that's better than not.
Yeah, at least you can have a day in court. So the update is that Maryland is one of the states who is removing any time limits on child sex abuse lawsuits.
How is this not being talked about more? I feel like this is pretty big news that there's no time limits here.
Well, it is being talked about, and there's a lot of states that are really pushing for this, and then other states who are like, screw it, no. You snooze, you lose, or whatever.
Jesus.
Yeah. But so the Maryland, and it's interesting because we have to see what happens once these laws get passed. And Maryland has passed this law. It's called Child Victims Act. And this was enacted last year, basically removing all statute of limitations on civil lawsuits regarding child abuse. And this includes both the actual perpetrator as well as any sort of entity or institution, where this occurred, say the Boy Scouts or a church or any type of organization, a school district, something along those lines. And what's happening. So as soon as this happened, it took effect October 1st, and immediately some people filed lawsuits. And this was actually against a diocese in Maryland, and they are appealing the case. Actually, what they wanted to do was they asked the judge to toss it out, and they were arguing on constitutional grounds that it violates their due process of law.
Isn't that what this whole thing is due process?
Well, maybe. So basically what due process is that you can't treat people differently. They're saying it violates their due process of law because they had a right that was taken away. And so basically due process has to do with not taking away people's rights unfairly. Okay. And they're saying basically this is a case that we didn't have to ever defend. We had we were in repose. We didn't have to worry about it. And now you took that away from us.
They flipped the switch, and now I guess I can kind of see that.
Yeah. So this trial court said, no, we believe that it is constitutional. Of course, they will appeal it, and it will probably ultimately go to the Maryland Supreme Court, where they would and they're addressing the state constitution, but most state constitutions are very similar to the federal constitution. So, we're going to see some fights on this, but this is a case to follow to see whether, if first of all, we got to get the states to enact these laws, and secondly, whether they can be upheld. Mm-hmm. So interesting stuff. I feel really strongly that more of these laws should be passed, especially after my experience with talking to so many of the Boy Scouts and and men who are in their 50s, 60s, even 70s now, who told me they hadn't told anybody, and yet it had been bothering them for decades. decades and decades. I mean, it's very serious, lifelong injury and suffering.
And how do you think this affects not only current cases, but kind of, I guess, cases in the future as well? Because, and in specific institutions, because as we've seen, there are very specific institutions where this is very prevalent. And like you said, with the Boy Scout cases, there are individuals in their 60s and 70s, and a lot of them, I'm sure, are under the assumption that it's out of the statute of limitations, that there is nothing that they can do. But when this becomes bigger news, when more states start following Maryland's path, I mean, what is this going to look like? Are we going to see class actions for a lot of these institutions that we knew had this type of behavior, like the Christian church, that type of thing? Or?
Well, it's probably not going to be class actions because, again, the class actions are where the damages are relatively minor and you need to get a bunch of people together to make it worthwhile. Yeah. The people who are coming forward have pretty significant injuries.
Very individualistic.
Very individual, right. And so like this first case that was filed was like three individual men. But I do think that, yes, as these laws are getting passed and as people are hearing about it, more people are going to understand that they don't think they have the ability to come forward, but they can. Yeah. And if they or want to do that, if they're in a place in their lives now where they feel able to do that, it's not too late. Mm-hmm. But this takes, when we were, when the Boy Scout cases, prior to the deadline for filing the claims, we were doing some advertising. A lot of firms were doing advertising because people didn't know that they could still make a claim. So it's going to be important that the information get out there as, hopefully as more states open that window.
I wonder if this is going to have any impact on kind of like the national statistics for sexual assault for men versus women, because I know I think I saw something out there where it's like the odds or the rates for men aren't lower than women. I'm pretty sure, actually, I don't know. I'm not going to comment on which is higher or lower, but I know that the rate of reporting is definitely lower for men. Yeah. And so with this kind of coming out and with the Boy Scouts, this kind of got me thinking about it is that going to shed more of a light on this area of sexual assault that we haven't really seen or society hasn't talked about? There's a massive Me Too movement, and we saw a lot of women stepping up and sharing their experiences, and I think that was a massive for the entire movement as a whole. But men kind of were sidelined there, right? Like there wasn't much. Not many of them were coming out, and even the ones that were, like Terry Crews, they were getting battered pretty hard by like press and everyone else.
Yeah. Well, I think that it is more difficult for men to come forward because, at least, and again, this is just from what people have told me, and my personal experience dealing with my clients was, that there's an idea of, there's a homosexuality issue, whereas where it's, men on women, that's a different type of thing, and they were concerned that because they were assaulted by a man, and generally the perpetrators are men still, that would put their sexuality into question. And so it made it even more difficult for them to come forward as opposed to, women coming forward when they've been abused by men.
Yeah.
Or girls.
Well, and these civil cases are interesting too, because the statute of limitations is very specific for civil cases. Yeah. Because even if the perpetrators are still out and walking and they haven't seen any criminal litigation or anything like that, there's a very real world where like a civil case is now brought up because the statute of limitations is erased. And now they're, face and face at court. Now this entire story is going out, and even though this person has never faced any criminal charges for it. Well,
and sometimes they have faced criminal charges, and in the past that was the only option was the criminal prosecution. But and a lot of people felt very validated when the perpetrator was prosecuted, went to jail, whatever happened. But it didn't provide any remuneration to them. It didn't provide, if they needed medical treatment, psychiatric treatment, pain and suffering, anything for that, they couldn't collect. And the reality is that even in a civil case, you're rarely going to be able to collect from the actual perpetrator as an individual. Yeah. Very few people have, just piles, of Bitcoin, like you do. But so, they probably couldn't, but you can also then go against whatever the organization was that allowed access to the child. filed. And those are the big organizations like, the
That do
Catholic
have the
Diocese, Church of Latter-day Saints.
Well, that's what I was kind of wondering with like seeing these institutions see this large influx of complaints and of reports and whatnot. Well,
that's why they're the ones who are fighting it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like, oh my gosh.
They're probably shitting bricks right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, just the ones that came in within the time frame, there are plenty of those. And it's not like, this, I mean, maybe it's less rampant now. There's more awareness and more prevention, but I mean, it still is happening.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of cases that fall within a statute of limitations, but this is just like opening the floodgates to all of the ones they thought they didn't have to worry about anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's interesting. I've never really thought of the of this being a problem, like statute of limitations. Like I knew it was like, oh, that doesn't really make sense, but it was just okay. Well, statute of limitation just exists. Like it is what it is. It's how law runs. Didn't really consider the option of just removing statute of limitations for very, very specific cases
very
like
specific
this.
cases. Yeah, and specifically, there are exceptions to the statute of limitations if somebody, is incompetent, or they're underage. I mean, those are the reasons where you look at it and you say, look, it's reasonable that they didn't get this case filed for whatever reason. And what they're saying in this circumstance is that this is a really specific type of injury, and it's very traumatic, and it's not something that people can just deal with by the time they're 20 years old. Mm-hmm. I mean, they probably can't.
Have we seen something like this before where the court of law kind of just recognizes that there are very, very specific niche areas of law that need to be bent, that need to be kind of treated differently than this other very general area?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head where in another situation where they say, hey, there's just no statute of limitations.
Well, maybe not even statute of limitations, but just like, well, we're going to walk around this a little bit differently, or we're going to tread carefully here. I don't know. Because I just think it's very peculiar, right? Because there's really every other field of law, there is statute of limitations or something along those lines. And to just completely remove it from very niche area, it sounds like almost never done before.
No, I mean, I would say something that might be a little bit similar is like the discovery rule, where maybe you got cancer from this condition 15 years ago, but you had no idea that it could have been related to like talc.
That makes sense.
So in a way, I mean, it's kind of taking away the statute of limitations. It still has to be reasonable, but you look at the circumstances and you say, well, it's reasonable, that.
But you have to argue that. You have to
argue that. Yeah.
And with this, you wouldn't even have to argue it.
With this, you wouldn't even have to argue it. You just say, there's no argument that there's any timely issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's a big point for defense too. Like in a lot of these cases, like that's kind of their first wall defense there. It's
Too
like,
late.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. I mean, and that's, and generally speaking, I mean, if you below the statute, you are done. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, it's the hardest, coldest, fastest rule, right? Mm-hmm. Of law. I mean, that's the one thing that, every single attorney has a real system in their firm to make absolutely sure that you don't miss that deadline. I mean, that is critical. Mm-hmm. Not something you come back from. So getting rid of it is a big deal. But again, this is such an atrocious, horrible situation of all the people that you would want to protect. I mean, who is more deserving of protection than a child who has been sexually assaulted?
Yeah.
So, so that's a very, very, very good news again.
Yeah, hopefully we see more states follow in line there. Please keep us updated on that one. And I'm curious on seeing like how that order works out, which states really start prioritizing this. And if this is going to get some actual headlines. Because Epstein's everywhere, right? Epstein's Island, everyone is still joking about that. And that was completely around sexual assault on minors. And now this is, helping those minors be able to actually do something about it in the future in some type of way.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad, but that really did shed a lot of light on it. Again, it's like you said, it's one of those things that you maybe don't hear about, and then there's some, big famous person, the Epstein situation, and it all comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have conspiracy theories with
yes, you do.
The Supreme, the very rich and wealthy. But anyways, just I'm not going to get off on that side tangent there.
Maybe we need to have an episode just of conspiracy theories at some point.
I love that. That's like how I spend half my time.
All right, let us know if you want to hear about that, listeners.
Yeah. Any other updates on cases? Any other direction you want to go on to here?
Yeah, so we've been talking this past week about shady backroom tactics and that sort of thing, and so I have a perfect example of that, of prioritizing profits and really underhanded dealings. And guess who's involved?
Monsanto. I was going to say Johnson & Johnson.
Well, they have plenty too. Yeah, they have plenty
a lot on their plate.
For sure, for sure. But so Monsanto is really trying to, they're desperate, we'll say. So if you kind of go back on the history of this whole thing, 6 years ago, Bayer basically made one of the worst purchases in American business. They bought Monsanto.
Nice.
To the tune of $63 billion.
Billion, wow.
$63 billion. Yeah, it was a big company. It was making lots of money, doing this pesticide thing, bought it. And at the time that they bought it, there was already a suit that was pending. And this was up in the San Francisco area by a groundskeeper.
Only one.
There was, so there was the one case. And this was in 2 months, 2 months after the merger goes through. The jury hits them with $289 million.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're probably like buyer's remorse, right?
Yeah.
And as we all know, it didn't stop there.
Well, I thought they didn't have to pay it. I thought Monsanto had to pay it.
Well, so basically, Bayer owns Monsanto now.
Yeah. So even though technically it's coming out of Monsanto, like treasury coffins, now
those coffins are Bayer's.
Yeah. Okay.
And we're talking coffins. It's just
and the money that are in those accounts, in those treasuries, those coffers, was accounted for in the buyout, and they spent more money because that money was available in those accounts. So that's kind of like a double whammy there. That sucks.
Yeah. But I mean, and so this first big case, this was a guy who worked it was a groundskeeper at a school district who had sprayed Roundup 20 to 30 times a year at the various properties. And then also there was on one occasion where the hose broke and he was actually soaked with Roundup.
Jesus.
And so basically, 2 years after he was on the job, so not a huge amount of time, he's covered with lesions and has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So, a really extreme case, fast and bad stuff. Just historically, there's been very little regulation of pesticides. And the theory is that the companies have been pretty much, buying off the EPA, basically, the Environmental Protection
What do you
Agency.
know? What do you know? Our federal government being swayed by big business.
Well, and so when there aren't regulations to protect people from these chemicals, then the only recourse that somebody has is a lawsuit.
Yeah.
So you can't prevent it from happening, but then at least you can get compensated if it does happen to you. Yes, you can get compensated for what's happened to you, compensatory, and also potentially punitives. So really, that's the only thing that was left, and these lawsuits have been flying. And so since that first lawsuit, there's been over 14 billion in settlements and judgments. And then I know we've talked about this before, but in 2020, about 95,000 cases were settled for about 10 billion.
Wow. I mean, what's even crazier is just the fact that this buyout went through and the amount of money that is on the table, the amount of money exchanging hands, and I'm assuming the amount of money that went into due diligence and making sure that all of the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, and like this.
Somebody's in trouble. Somebody did not.
I mean, holy fuck, right? Like, how do you let this slip through? Especially on a chemical company. Like, I feel like your first assumption, and then there's a lawsuit lined up already. It's just,
so the lawsuit's pending. I mean, literally, the verdict came out like 2 months later. But I mean, I can see somebody saying, okay, here's this groundskeeper in California. He's got cancer. I mean, cancer comes from all kinds of things.
That is actually pretty crazy, though. Like, a single groundskeeper came up and essentially kind of took the I don't even know what to say, wind out of their sails. That's not the right analogy, but essentially uncovered this entire problem, this entire company, and revealed them for what they're out to be, and that's poisoning people.
Well, and then bam, everybody starts coming forward, and so that's what all of the, I mean, like 95,000 cases settled 2020. There's still about 50,000 cases pending. And as we've talked about before, this is still an open case. We're still accepting cases. People are still getting diagnosed and filing new cases. So all this happens, and the stock has lost about 70% of its value.
Jesus Christ.
Right. So they're like, as you would say, shit in the sheets, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I mean,
they have shit in the sheets. They've rolled around in it.
Yeah. So they're desperate. So now what are they going to do? I mean,
Bankruptcy.
No, actually, they're not doing bankruptcy. But what they're doing right now is that they are trying to change the law to protect themselves. So, and what the ideal would be, what they would really like to have would be like a federal law passed by Congress that would shut down current lawsuits and also prevent state and local governments from putting any restrictions on pesticides. But, well, I know it sounds crazy, but there's actually an amendment that's been tacked onto the Farm Bill right now.
I love it. Yeah.
Right now that would do this. And, these amendments that are tacked onto these bills and everything, I mean, they just try to like sneak them in.
Oh,
right?
100%.
I mean, there's a lot. And then so much of these bills are really good. People, they want to vote for it. And so some crap just comes through with it. Luckily, there's a lot of opposition to this. There's about 150 lawmakers that are currently opposing it. And so it's not looking ideal. So then they say, okay, we may not get this federal law passed right now. So let's try some states. Let's go state. Why?
Why not?
Yeah. And so they've picked 3 states initially, and so the states are Missouri, and the reason for that is that Monsanto is headquartered in Missouri. And then there's Idaho. They have a phosphate mine in Idaho, and Iowa, where they have a manufacturing plant. And so they're hoping that they can convince the lawmakers in those, in hopefully all 3 of those states, to pass one of these laws. And of course, what they do is, they're supporting campaigns.
Oh yeah, I mean they're buying these politicians. It's just straight up what it is.
I mean, basically, they're trying to do that. They're also doing a lot of advertising and marketing in those areas, and and so these are areas where there's a lot of farming, and they're saying, look, farmers need this product, and Monsanto is a huge business, and they're paying taxes, and so they're saying, look, it's going to destroy a lot of people in these states if we're not protected. So we'll see if any of these states pass. If they do, of course, what they're going to do is try other states. But basically, the way that what they're trying to pass is, so the way that you bring these cases is failure to warn. And so they're basically saying this glyphosate is it's a carcinogen, and you didn't warn. You needed to put it on the label. You needed to tell people, hey, if you use this, you might get cancer. Didn't warn. And so what they want these laws to say is that you can't sue for failure to warn as long as the label's been approved back to the EPA. Okay, and again, the label that doesn't have the warning.
EPA is fucking useless. It's like the FDA. Like no one there does anything. They're asleep at the wheel, using 2008 Macintoshes to go through billions of dollars
and yellow stickies and things.
Yeah, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. I mean, this is insane, and it really gets me heated too, because I think this at its base is what the problem is with these large pharmaceutical companies, big business, and honestly, our current government and just ways of making law. Like, I mean, everyone is so easily swayed with these campaign dollars, and reasonably so, honestly, right?
Well,
like
they need them.
Yeah, it is their career. It's their job. They lose their job if they don't do it. And then it just we get into these situations where there are laws that clearly are not in the best interest of the people being tacked into these bills that, sure, maybe it is in the best interest of the people, the overall bill or very specific aspects of the bill, but it's just like sliminess,
It's totally dirty politics.
It's insane. And the fact that there are people that are elected that know this and are the ones tacking it on there and then on the back checking their Wells Fargo account saying, oh, nice, thank God, as they sign the paper. And it's just insane to me that they can get away with that.
Yeah, well, definitely dirty stuff, and very, very scary. I mean, if a company has absolutely no fear of any responsibility or any liability, what won't they do? I mean, again, we don't have the protections limiting the exposure of these products up front, and now you're going to take away the
Only recourse
the
of
only
action.
recourse that they have, which is filing lawsuits. So basically, they can just give us all cancer.
Yeah, well, and it's they're saying like, look, people, Minnesota, right? Minnesota is where their home base is at.
Missouri,
and like the 3 states. They say, look, there's a lot of jobs here, a lot of farmers, a lot of people use our product. These lawyers are ruining our state and are gonna make things difficult, and you guys are gonna lose your jobs. But at the end of the day, they might lose their lives because of Monsanto. Like if these laws are passed and they are allowed to do whatever they want, even crazier too, putting the responsibility on the EPA, which they know they have full control over, like they fucking own, it just makes it 10 times worse.
Well, I mean, they're basically going to approve whatever label. I mean, that's just, and again,
it's like the FDA.
Part of it, yes, there's allegations that they're being paid off and that sort of thing, but also they're just overwhelmed and understaffed and underfunded.
And no one gives a fuck. Like, no one in government really cares enough to do anything that can do anything about it, at least. Maybe that's too controversial.
Well, I mean, that is your opinion.
Not partisan enough.
But all I'm saying is that, whether it's for evil or just for lack of resources and that sort of thing, it's not happening. And so, you need some way to keep these companies in line and to force them to do the right thing or to punish them for doing the wrong thing. So this is just interesting because, like you said, I mean, you guessed it, bankruptcy. I mean, they're trying to figure out different ways around this because these verdicts keep coming.
Yeah.
And they're fighting the cases. They do win some of the cases. But there's these studies. I mean, these studies are going back to the 80s where they exposed rats to the glyphosate. And I mean, they were getting tumors right and left. And the rats that weren't exposed to it. I mean, so this is a long time ago.
Well, and the EPA was apparently fine with it, right? They signed off on it. So what could be the problem?
Who cares about rats?
So I'm assuming there has to be a ton of outrage on the personal injury attorney side of things. I mean, you guys got to be coming together on the back end of things and saying, all right, guys, well, what are we going to do? Like if this passes, I mean, every chemical and pesticide company, it's just free range.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's interesting too, because, a lot of the candidates kind of on the good side, I mean, they show up at these things like American Association for Justice and those sorts of things. I mean, and trial attorneys, are supporters because we are very concerned about, protecting consumer rights and keeping big business in line. But, it just goes to, there's, I mean, it's important. If this is important to you, make sure you vote. Make sure that you know which lawmakers are supporting these types of bills and these types of laws. Do some research and, make your voice heard. It's very important. And if you can contribute, do so.
Yeah.
Because God knows that the other side is contributing.
Yeah, I know. There's always a suggestion of like calling your congressman, your lawmakers, and letting them know your opinions, and emailing them, sending them a letter, text, whatever it may be. I mean,
those things do help, though.
It does. I mean, yeah.
It helps if there's if it's 5 people, it doesn't help. But if there's 5,000 people, it really does help. And that does happen on some issues. Some issues are just really hot topics, and people truly care about them, and that will affect. I mean, because if somebody votes against what everybody wants, they're not going to keep their job.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. If you feel strongly about that, reach out to your lawmakers. And honestly, I mean, the money of these big businesses going into politician pockets, that's a both party problem. That's everywhere. That's across the aisle everywhere. So anyways, insanity. That is more shady tactics coming out of them, as expected, honestly, right? Like Monsanto, Johnson.
Creative, but not unexpected.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely have taken it to a new step. I thought the Texas 2-step was a good one, trying to sneak in a federal law to really sign off as like a blank check for yourself. That has to take the cake.
We hope it just doesn't take the cake.
Yeah. We are kind of coming up on the last little bit of the show. Is there any things you wanted to focus on for sure?
Sure. Well, so one recall that's pretty important. I always kind of focus on these ones that affect babies and children. And there has been a recall that's affecting 63,000 infant swings And these are manufactured by a company called Jool Baby, Jool Baby. They were sold at Walmart stores and a number of online sites, including Amazon, JoolBaby.com, Babylist.com, and Target. And these are, I mean, there's kind of a funky story behind this one as well, but these swings actually violate federal law because they're designed and marketed for infant sleep, and they have an incline exceeding 10 degrees. So there's actually a federal law saying that if it has more of an incline than 10 degrees and it's intended for sleeping, you can't produce it, you can't sell it. It's illegal because it's just too dangerous. It'll kill babies.
Yeah.
And this one it's really strange how this happened. These are manufactured, this company is based in China. And speaking of sneaky tactics, they were made in China, and they were being made, and President Joe Biden signed the Safe Sleep for Babies Act. But before it took effect in November of 2022. So they were produced and they started selling them after the bill was signed, but before it took effect. So basically, when they were being sold, they were already illegal. And so this legislation prohibits the sale, manufacture, or distribution of incline sleepers for infants and also crib bumpers.
Is there any oversight here? I mean, FDA wouldn't be checking at this.
So this is a CPSC, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and it is a voluntary recall. Basically, they got called on it; they have to recall them. And if you have one of these, you definitely do not want to be using it. You can return it. You can also contact them, and they can provide a free repair kit, new instructions, stuff like that. I would just be taking the damn thing back personally. Yeah. And it's even funny too, because one of the things that they change out is they have these hanging plush toys. And so they're like sleepy themed toys, but since they want to say it's not for sleep now, they change them out for non-sleep themes such as sun cloud and raindrop.
Raindrops kind of put me out. I don't know. That's still pretty sleepy in my mind.
Well, if it's a stuffed hanging raindrop, it might not put you out. If you actually
I think it might put me out more than seeing real raindrops.
Yeah. So anyway, there haven't been any deaths reported, but we know that just by the way that it's made, it's dangerous. So if you have these, don't use them, return them. You can go on the CPSC website and get more information there.
And so the CPSC, who are supposed to be kind of given oversight over these items, make sure that no dangerous items are going to babies. I'm assuming they kind of got caught in this weird phase where this law was passed. They didn't exactly know if they should be enforcing it or what exactly they were enforcing it until the date of. And then this kind of slipped between the cracks.
Well, they probably didn't even know about this product. I mean, the product is out there, and there
was nothing wrong with it according to any other law before this most recent act was signed.
Legally, right. I mean, it still potentially would have been dangerous, but there's actually a law saying, specifying the details on it, and it does not comply with what the law requires.
I didn't even know there's a specific law for this.
Well, just recently in 2022. The Safe Sleep for Babies Act.
Well, it's good. It's a good name, too. Safe Sleep. I would vote for that.
We should all have safe sleep.
Yeah, especially babies. I mean, they need it.
Yeah.
They're pretty lazy.
Well, I think we have time for one story in the news before we move on.
Let's do it.
And this is one that is near and dear to my heart because it involves Las Vegas, where I go to regularly, and we'll be going again next month. So this guy was staying at the Venetian Hotel, again, one I've stayed at, very nice hotel. And while he was sleeping, a scorpion bit him in the balls.
Wow. I don't know. They don't bite. I think they sting.
Oh, yeah, stung. Stung him in the balls. But it seems the whole thing sounded very strange to me because, I mean, what part?
Yeah, what part? What do you mean? This is just another day here. Another Prioritizing Profits podcast.
Exactly. But, I mean, scorpions, we live in the desert. Las Vegas is in the desert. Scorpions live in the desert. You have to realize that. And if I was like out camping in a tent in the desert and I was stung by a scorpion, I wouldn't be particularly shocked.
Well, it's very different.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that what the heck? Like, you're at the Venetian Hotel I mean, this is a very committed scorpion. I mean, he's strolling in out of the desert,
dedication.
down the strip, into the Venetian.
I feel like he might have been smuggled in. I'm just being honest here. Something's not adding up here. I would check the cleaners. I would check the bags.
Yeah, no, realistically, I guess so. Because, I mean, I just was kind of thinking this through, and I'm like, man, just to get to your room, I mean, the way that the hotels are designed, you have to go by all of the tables and all of the slot machines.
Catch a ride in the elevator.
and then go 40 flights and then stroll in the hallway and then finally snuggle into this guy's bed. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that it probably did come in, on some... in some bag or who knows, maybe a suitcase or something like that. But, I've heard of a lot of stories from Las Vegas, but having a scorpion sting somebody in the balls in a nice hotel is a new one for me.
Yeah, I think that's nightmare fuel too. I mean, I think most people, when you go to Airbnb or a hotel, like there's always that fear that there's just... Like, you get under the sheets and there's a bed of spiders.
I didn't even think about that.
Really? You don't think about that? Have you seen, like, the clips where there's the mama spiders and they have, like, 800 babies on their butt, on the back?
Oh.
Because that's what they do. They carry their babies.
Yeah.
And what people will do is, like, if you, like, flick one or when they're ready... The babies just fucking start running out. I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds. I think it might be thousands depending on the spider. Hundreds of babies running out, scurrying everywhere. My worst fear is seeing that like in my house or in a hotel or something. Because
move.
What do you do? That is hundreds. That's thousands of spiders running around that are just babies too. They're tiny. They're fast. You can't see them. I mean, in 2 years, you're gonna have a full Amazon in your house.
Oh my gosh! Well, and it's like the whole actually one of the movies that scared me the most that I'm still traumatized by is that arachnophobia movie. See, this is probably like an 80s movie. You probably haven't seen it, but arachnophobia, and it's just...
Is that where giant spiders like take over New York and like climb on the buildings?
Not really giant spiders, but just like there's, an overrun of spiders. You have to watch it sometime. But I mean, literally, when I've watched that movie, I just scream the whole time and close my eye and I cover my eyes. I mean, it's just because, there's just spiders everywhere.
I feel like back then they probably had to do like puppets and it wasn't even really good CGI or anything like that.
It was pretty good.
People dressed up with extra arms hanging off them. Role-playing spiders.
Well, maybe you should check it out anyway. I haven't seen it in many years because, I mean, it's traumatic to me. That one and then the snakes on a plane because being like in a small place with like snakes.
That's my phobia, snakes. I can't do snakes.
Snakes on a plane would be bad for you.
When you're talking about how like if you got stung out in the woods or in the desert, you're in the desert. That's what you expect.
Yes, their home.
Yeah.
The Venetian is not their home.
Okay, yeah.
It's my home.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, if I go to Vegas, I get a nice room, I go out for some drinks, I come home, I'm tired, a little buzzed, I want to take a nice bath because they always have nice baths and they got the little jets in there and I get in the bath, I turn the water on, and all of a sudden I get a bite on my nuts and it's a rattlesnake. Yeah, I'm going to have a problem. Yes, I'm in the desert, but I'm also taking a nice bubble bath in Vegas. It has no right being in that bathtub.
He's not paying the
unless he's splitting it. Unless he's splitting it with me, no. At least take me out to dinner. I mean, come on. Straight to the business, funny business, huh?
Absolutely.
Alrighty. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in on this episode of Prioritizing Profits, Dangerous Drug and Product Cases. We'll see you next week, same day, same time. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us. You can throw in the comment section wherever you're watching this, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever you want. We'll see it. If it's something a little bit more personal, a little bit more private, you don't want out there in the public, fully understand. You can always DM us on all of those sites. We always look at our DMs, or you can also email us, podcast@showardlaw.com. All of those emails will be kept private. If you have a story, experience, a question, anything like that, we're happy to go over it. And if you like what we're doing, like, follow, subscribe, retweet, repost, whatever you got, we appreciate it. But thank you again for tuning in, and we will see you next week, same day, same time. Have a good one. Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.